Okay, so the March 8th meeting of the Faculty Senate will come to order. Welcome, everyone. We do have a quorum. As always, I have some reminders about procedure. So after each presentation or report, senators will have the opportunity to ask questions or make comments. Senators may use the audio feature or they may use the chat. Senators who raise their hand to speak will be recognized first. To raise your hand, you can click on the hand raise icon at the bottom of your screen. If you don't see that, then click on the participants icon also at the bottom of your screen, and you should see the option to raise your hand from there. Please wait to be recognized before you speak. And then when you are recognized, be sure to announce your first and last name and your college so that we know who you are and where you are from. According to Robert's rules, senators are permitted to speak up to 2 times on any one motion. If there is a motion on the floor and a senator has already been recognized twice, you may not be recognized a 3rd time. That senator will not be recognized a 3rd time. And senators and panelists, if you aren't speaking, please remember to mute your microphones. Before we approve the minutes, I wanted to just say a couple of things about the last meeting that we have, particularly the end of the last meeting. So you might recall that that tensions were particularly high and that conversation became heated. And that's, you know, it's certainly understandable. We'd all just gotten the news that faculty wouldn't be vaccinated through WVU. And there were folks who were pretty upset and angry and frustrated and even fearful. So there came a point during that meeting when people started to approach one another in anger, and then communication started to break down, and then at that point I ended the meeting because nothing productive was going to happen, and I believe that folks really started to disengage. As Senate Chair, I have the responsibility to ensure that lines of communication remain open, communication between faculty, communication between faculty and administrators, and that in this space we really need to be having productive conversations together. And I really, you know, sincerely believe that in order to do so, what we have to do is try to approach one another with some understanding, because, you know, certainly there will be moments in the future, even the very near future, maybe even at this meeting, when those kind of feelings of anger and frustration and even fear will bubble up again. And when that happens, you know, again, in this forum and in this space, what I'm hoping that that we all can do is just, you know, take a beat, take a moment, kind of collect your thoughts, maybe even, you know, try to sort of think about where that other person is kind of coming from. And, you know, if you can't do that, then maybe even just sort of think about how you might want someone to respond to you in the moment. You know, how would you want somebody to approach you? And then kind of once you've taken that kind of moment of reflection, I think then, you know, ask your question. That would be a good point to ask your question or make your point or your argument on behalf of your constituents, or even just kind of say your piece. Because, you know, again, like I believe that we'll just have a much better outcome and have much more kind of generative and productive conversations if we really do try and, you know, approach one another from that kind of place of understanding. And I, you know, like I know that that's not easy, and I may also need reminders to do that very thing. So I just wanted to say that. So thank you for, you know, for listening and for indulging me. But I felt like I needed to say something after that first meeting. or after that last meeting. So, okay, on to the approval of the minutes from our February 8th Senate meeting. Those minutes have been distributed as an annex in your agenda. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes from the February meeting? Okay, hearing no corrections, the minutes are approved as written. So we shall move on to our report from the president, from President Gee.
Thank you very much, Natalie. Can you hear me all right?
Mm-hmm.
Great. I'm in some far-flung hotel, so if you wonder this is a strange background, that's where I am. We're traveling today. So first of all, thanks for your comments. I think that we all can reflect on the fact that in today's world in which our tempers are so short, that civility is something we all ought to capture. So I just wanted to thank you for saying that. And I want to also note that I'm really grateful to our faculty, our staff, our alumni, our friends, for our most successful West Virginia Day of Giving. You know, this was our 4th time at having a day of giving. So we started out at about $2.5 million. We then went to $6 million the second year, then we went to 11.3. And this year, I literally thought that we would probably not do as well, given the fact that we were in the middle of a pandemic. There was families were concerned about financial issues, a variety of other things. But I must say that we should all take a moment to pause and be grateful for the support we received. We raised nearly $12 million, $11.9 million with 5,000 donations, 5,000 volunteers, which is 1,000 more than we had last year. You know, our football coach and our basketball coach see winning at the end of the day by scores on the scoreboard. For us, it's really about seeing the success of our students, the progress we're making in terms of our research, but also the support of our alumni and friends, and the fact that that continues to increase is something that I really am very pleased about. So this unwavering support will help to ensure that our university and our students truly fulfill their promise of a stronger tomorrow. And saying that, I think that also you should note that it did go to it did have a great effect on our scholarship fundraising, which is something, of course, that we're very focused on. We did talk about our COVID issues. We did have a forum on that. We know how important the tradition of graduation is to our students and their families. So we are planning, in the light of this pandemic, for an in-person commencement this spring, which will be held in the stadium, by the way. Of course, it's important that everyone continue to practice caution, follow health and safety guidance for wearing masks and physical distancing, symptom monitoring, and getting tested when symptomatic issues arise. By the way, our commencement website is graduation.wvu.edu, and we have a lot more information, but I'm delighted that we're going to be moving back to an in-person graduation. As you know, we did not realize, we did not believe that a campus carry bill would be introduced, or if it would be, it would be lightly introduced, but one has been introduced, Senate Bill 246, which is called the Campus Carry Bill. And I just want to be very clear, we are not supportive. We believe, and I personally believe, that deadly weapons have no place on our campuses except in the hands of our law enforcement personnel or those authorized by the university. And we've always believed that local control by our Board of Governors is the best basis for decisions about security on our campuses and around the state. So what I thought I would do is I would invite my colleague, Rob Alsop, to join us. And I think he's here to join us and talk a little bit about this bill and about the general tenor of the legislative session, so that everyone can be updated. So Rob, if you're there, I'd appreciate your doing so.
I am here.
Great, thanks.
Very good. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I hope your Monday's off to a good start. So the legislative session is gearing towards the halfway point this year because we have a new term for the governor, even though it's the same governor. There was a 30-day pause after the typical second Wednesday in January start. So they took a 30-day pause, and now we're on for a 60-day straight session. As President Gee indicated, we stay in communication with our legislative leaders and contacts. And for some period of time, we had not heard a whole lot about campus carry or whether it might see an agenda during this session. We now have, and actually just happened another one today, we have 3 campus carry bills that have been introduced. There was one that was introduced initially, Senate Bill, I think 246. There was another one that was introduced in the Senate 570, and then one that was introduced today in the House of Delegates, all with varying degrees of what they would do. I'll take just a couple of minutes and talk about, I know a lot of you know this, but some may not, but talk a little bit about the substance of what we're talking about, and then the legislature. So currently in West Virginia, we are what they call a concealed carry state, or a constitutional carry is what they sometimes refer to it as. And so if you're in the public town square, you are permitted to carry a concealed weapon without a permit. Now, if you cross state lines into another state that does have a concealed weapon law, then you have to have a concealed weapon permit to cross that state line and into that other state moving forward. But if you're staying solely within the West Virginia, you're now not required, and it's been that way for 4 or 5 years, that you do not have to do that. However, if you cross onto someone's property and they ask you to leave, if you cross onto someone else's property in West Virginia, not the public town square, with a concealed weapon, and they ask you to leave and that person doesn't, then that person can be guilty of a trespass and charged criminally. So technically it's not illegal violation of the state criminal code to carry a gun onto state property, but we do have the right to keep someone off of our property. There's one exemption to that. 2 or 3 years ago, there was a bill passed that allows someone to store a weapon in their car if they're doing business somewhere. And so if you're at a Walmart or a Target or on WVU's campus, you are authorized to store your weapon in that parking lot, in that car, out of sight. So the campus carry legislation that has been introduced, what it does is it says that WVU, on property that we own or that we physically control or are in active control of, we would no longer be able to prohibit weapons from those locations. So if we asked someone to leave and they had a concealed weapon permit, they'd have the right to be on the property and wouldn't be guilty of trespass. Most of the pieces of legislation require the individual to have a concealed weapon permit, although the bill that was introduced this morning wouldn't even require a concealed weapon permit. So the legislation, and the one that passed the House of Delegates 2 years ago, would say if you have a concealed weapon permit, then you are authorized to carry on a state institution of higher education. And then they have some exceptions on that. So venues with the capacity of more than 1,500 spectators, or daycare facilities, security areas of any building used by law enforcement, areas where we have adequate security measures, so metal detectors and armed law enforcement, disciplinary hearings, areas used by K-12 or private entities, areas where it's prohibited by state or federal law, individual offices. The bill that passed the House of Delegates in 2019 also prohibited it in dorm rooms, in areas where there are chemicals which may not react appropriately with weapons, or where there's counseling going on. Those last 3 were stripped out of a couple of the bills that were introduced this session, moving forward. And so while initially we didn't think that campus carry would see an agenda this session. We are starting to hear from a few of our folks at the legislature that there is some active consideration for potentially moving a campus carry bill this session. As President Gee indicated, we have expressed our opposition to that legislation running. And we remain hopeful that it will not move on to an agenda. I will say that both in the House of Delegates and in the Senate, there are likely more votes in support of a piece of campus carry legislation than there was in 2019, where the bill passed the House, I think, with 60 votes, but then failed to reach out of the Judiciary Committee. It lost, I think, by 2 votes from there. The Republican Democratic split in both the House and Senate skewed further towards Republicans. And so we don't know whether there are the votes to pass it in the Senate, but there are certainly more support than there was 2 years ago. So we are staying in close contact with our contacts and representatives in the legislature and are prepared to articulate why we think that local control and current law is the most appropriate in this area. And that is our position. If it starts to move and it's going to pass, we will try to make it as palatable and appropriate in that context as is possible. But we have been and do plan to indicate that as an institution, we oppose those efforts and we do not believe that we have a problem on our campus, nor do we believe it's one that needs a legislative solution. And we'll keep your faculty senate leadership apprised. We briefed student government, staff council, and faculty senate leadership late last week, and I told President Gee and Provost Reed and faculty senate leadership, I thought it would be appropriate at this point, given the murmurs we're hearing, to alert the faculty senate that this may make it on an agenda, so that you guys would be aware of it. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions or pivot back to you, President Gee.
Any questions? Madam Chair, do we see any questions? Saying that, thank you very much, Rob. I think that we all know that this is something that we have successfully stymied over the last, at least since I've been here, over the last 5 or 6 years. It does keep coming back, and the unfortunate thing is that it has been passed in a number of states. In fact, it's been passed, I believe, in almost every state that the Big 12 is in right now. So we find ourselves somewhat in a deficit position, but we'll be vigorously opposed to it and do everything we possibly can. And we'll call on the Senate to help us, and our faculty did a great job last year of letting their concerns be known. And for that, we're grateful, and we will call upon you when needed. And for that, I can assure you. Madam Chairman, I think that the chairperson, I think that is my report right now.
Gordon, can I just say something? There was there was a question in the
Oh, I didn't see it. I'm sorry.
chat from Wagner Benedito about what the faculty could do. And if it's okay, Gordon, I would just share, and I don't know, Natalie, were you going to address this today?
We have a resolution.
Okay, that's what I was going to suggest, that Marshall faculty had, the faculty senate had done that. So.
Okay, well, good. And we do have a resolution today, as I understand, so that's good. But we need to have people also make their issues known. A resolution is one thing, engagement is another. So we'll certainly want to make that known too. So, Madam Chairman, Madam Chair, that is my
Fine.
that is my report.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to call on Dave Hauser to introduce the resolution. So I'm going to share my screen, and I'm also going to, if you want to link to it, you can look at it in the chat. Dave, are you there?
I'm here. I'm just sort of waiting for you to get something up on the
Share my
screen.
screen. Okay, hold on 1 second. Okay, can everyone see? I can make this bigger. Or it just it says whereas here.
Yeah, so while she's while Natalie's fixing that, I'll get started. This is very similar to the resolution that was passed the last couple of times this has come up in the legislature. And so that was the basis for the text here. The major change is that we have, at least as this is written, it fully says that we urge the legislature to reject any form of legislation that would allow non-emergency personnel to carry firearms on campus. So we take that sort of full stand against it. We're sorry this is coming up at the last minute, and we couldn't have distributed this sort of earlier to let people take a look at it. But as Rob and President Gee noted, this sort of came out of left field sort of at the last minute. And given the nature of how quick the legislature can operate, it did not make sense for us to sort of let this circulate for a month and then vote on it again in a month. So we're bringing this forward now as a resolution of the West Virginia University Faculty Senate, and we would obviously we can talk about it, but we would ask that this be adopted.
Are there any questions or points of discussion? For the resolution. When I'm sharing screens, it's hard for me to see hands of the like, and so I might need some. Okay, I don't see any hands right now. Okay. Is there a second on the motion?
Well, Scott Fleming put a question up in chat
okay.
asking, is it time to discuss and plan for additional daycare centers on campus and possibly seek legislation to allow fewer regulations to allow the same? Scott, if I could ask you to sort of speak to what that says, I'm not entirely clear what you're asking for there.
Well, based upon Scott Fleming, Chambers College of Business, based upon what Rob was saying and what we've known from the past, that if there are daycare centers, that limits the applicability of the concealed carry and the options therein. So we know, and the tough part is the budget, right? We know that there's probably a need for additional daycare centers for our folks for when schools go out of session. And if you have them strategically placed, then that certainly limits the ability of people to conceal carry into those buildings. It's just something that may dovetail in with this. I don't know whether there'd be any funds available for it, but it might be something that we start talking about. Rob, you want to have any comments on that?
Well, let me start general and then get more specific. I will say that prior to COVID, which seems like a long time ago, we had begun discussions with the provost and president about, and actually we had started looking for locations potentially on campus where we could look for additional daycare, because we know and have heard that it's a priority for our faculty and staff. And when COVID hit, it sort of went on the back burner. So no promises. I do think, over the next year, we're going to be looking at by statute, we're required to look at a capital master planning document. And I suspect this will be one of the issues that will be discussed from that perspective. I think obviously if there were additional daycare centers on campus, those would be excluded from the legislation. And, if that may or may not impact whether folks would decide to go with the convenience or inconvenience of having to walk around buildings or places that they couldn't go if they were carrying a weapon. I don't know whether that would feed into it, but I guess it might.
Are there other questions or comments? Okay, is there a second on the resolution?
I'll second it.
Okay, thank you. All right, so all those in favor of approving the resolution, please raise your hand. Okay, I'm going to call the vote, or sorry, not call the vote, but close the vote. Okay. Julie, could you lower hands, please? Any opposed? Could you just lower that one hand? Julie. There we go. Thank you. Any opposed? Please raise your hand. Okay, I'm going to close the vote. Okay, so the resolution carries, and this resolution will be distributed to members of the Senate and the House of Delegates. As the provost and president mentioned, we are going to be kept kind of apprised of what's going on with Campus Carry, and we may need to mobilize pretty quickly. After this meeting, what I'll do is I'll reach out to the folks who I know were quite involved the last time that this came around, so that we can kind of start a conversation and determine, what we need to do if the bill really starts to gain additional traction.
And Natalie, if I could just quickly,
Yes.
When we've reached out to some senators and delegates, they haven't heard that it's going to move at all. And so what I will say is I think there's a threat or a chance that it will run. And so as far as additional engagement beyond the resolution, what I'll say is it's always up to an individual as to when they want to contact their legislator and advocate before or against something. But what I will say is as soon as we get the first win that it is likely to be on the first agenda, we will let faculty, staff, and student leadership know that it's moved from it might run to where it's very likely it's going to run. And that may very well change your thought process as to level of engagement when it's more likely that it's going to start through the process of moving through a committee. And we're talking to people multiple times a day at the legislature, and first when we get of it, we will let you know that it's started to change a little bit in terms of what I'd consider active consideration.
Okay, thanks. That makes sense. Okay, so we will move on to our next agenda item, which is a report from Provost Reed.
Great. Thank you, Natalie. And good afternoon, everyone. It is week 8 of the semester, and believe it or not, it's the anniversary of going to remote instruction from a year ago. So we have been through this COVID craziness for a year now, and I know that it has been extremely stressful and trying for all of us, but particularly for our faculty and our instructors who've had to pivot multiple times and deal with very challenging circumstances in the classroom and beyond. And I just want to, repeat what I've said before, but how much we appreciate the dedication of our faculty to our students, your passion for the university, and your patience. Not just with the students, but with the ambiguity of an evolving situation. And I know it's been a long haul, and If there's any good news, I think that light at the end of the tunnel is getting a little bit brighter with the announcement last week from the governor that the state is going to prioritize for vaccinations, educators 40 years old and up, both K through 12 and at the higher education level. I know that there'll be more on that during this meeting, but I know that was also a point of contention at the last meeting. So, I think things are rounding the corner somewhat, and I'm grateful. But of course, we still have the next couple of months to get through. Just a couple of calendar reminders. Academic advising starts on March 15th. And our students are going to be registering this time for fall semester, but also summer. Because as you may remember, we delayed registration for summer session because of COVID. So that's all going to be starting on March 15th. And then we have no more breaks until finals week, except with the exception of the university spring holiday on April 2nd. So that's the beginning of the semester. Very briefly, going to talk about a few other items, including academic transformation. The academic transformation process is underway. 2 weeks ago, we created a new page on the Provost's office website dedicated to academic transformation. On that site, we provide a general outline of the process and the timeline, and we list the 4 external committees who will be participating in the process. These include the advisory committee, which is comprised mainly of faculty who will be reviewing and providing feedback on the data and analysis that our office will be using to inform our process. And that group has already met twice since the last Faculty Senate meeting, and it's being co-chaired by Ashley Martucci and David Addis from EAB. There's also a very large student success committee that includes many faculty members, a faculty rewards and recognition committee that is comprised almost entirely of faculty, and a small graduate programs task force that also includes faculty. And right now we are negotiating the rules of engagement with these committees, determining how the work of the committees will be reported out and be available to share with faculty and others. Progress, we made some progress on the concept of a summer boot camp. So as you may recall, at the last Faculty Senate meeting, Amy Hessel brought up the idea of a summer boot camp for incoming freshmen who may need more preparation this year because of COVID and the kind of intermittent in-person instruction that high school students received. And I think she was particularly concerned about students being prepared for STEM courses when they start the university. So this was a great idea. We jumped on it immediately, and Evan Witters reached out and met with several faculty, including Amy, and begin to map out what that might look like. And so as a result, we are tentatively planning to pilot a program this summer aimed at struggling students. And I thought I would ask Evan Witters just to briefly explain, kind of what we're looking at.
Thanks, Marianne. Yeah, so I'm excited about this, and thanks to Amy and Dave and Emily Murphy and Natalie for helping me sort of conceive it and set up what it could look like. What we're gonna try to do here is have both an on-campus component, which will help with acclimating to the campus. That may be a little bit of a heavier lift because we'll have to charge the students something for room and board, and they probably won't have their financial aid yet. But we would like to see the students be able to take, probably up to 6 hours, pretty much tuition free this summer if they want to come for the last 3 weeks of summer and be in a dorm and eat here. They could take 6 credits and hopefully get ahead. And also we would have success coaches embedded in those classes. So they'd be learning how to sort of study and do assignments and be diligent in a college environment. So I'm really excited about that. We also want to offer some online sections as well, which would be pretty much, it wouldn't be free, but it would be nominal. We're thinking about $75 a course. And these would, again, be targeted to our students where we need to get the data right, but really we want to target students who we view as being at risk rather than opening it up to all students, because one, we don't have the capacity, and two, if we open up to all students, I think they'll probably fill with honor students wanting extra credits for a reasonable price pretty quickly. So we're gonna do the outreach on our side and try to make sure we're reaching students who we really think, you know, are gonna have a more difficult time when they come here in the fall, and let them try to at least get some credits in the bank online ahead of time. Emily Murphy and Extension have been good enough to suggest that they could perhaps provide some student success efforts for these students as well in their home counties if they're in West Virginia, or maybe even reach out to other extension offices outside of West Virginia. But that would be a way for them to get some in-person tutoring or success coaching, even if they're doing an online section. Otherwise, the plan is, again, for this bunch to have an instructor, but also to integrate a success coach into the class. So someone would be reaching out to the students, and if they don't do their homework, sort of tracking them down and trying to work with them and figure out what the root causes of that were. Probably just offer some, hopefully some basic math classes that these students, at-risk students, might be behind in, coming out of high school behind in, and could use a review on. And then maybe English 101 and some Jeff courses. Nothing too wild out there, because it'd be 3 weeks. We really don't want to get into really a lot of the in-depth STEM work. I just feared that would be too compressed for students really to do well. And that's about it. Yeah, any suggestions you have, please let me know, or someone else in Faculty Senate, Natalie or Emily or Dave, and then we'll be happy to try to integrate that. As Marianne said, things are moving ahead really quickly, so I'm excited about the idea, and it looks like we're going to be able to pull it together.
Great, thank you so much, Evan. And again, great idea from from Amy Hessel, a creative, solution to a potential problem that may impact the ability of these students to be successful in the classroom. So we'll see how that goes. We'll pilot it and see how it goes. Just a couple other announcements and things to share with you. This year, this spring, Research Week will run from April 2nd through April 12th through April 16th. My team is laughing because I always get the calendar wrong. And the long form scholarship celebration will kick off Research Week, and it will be presented again as a virtual showcase this year. Only now we have a little more time to prepare than we did last year. The Office of the Provost will be launching another round of Transform This Challenge grants this spring. You may recall last spring that we awarded $1,500 mini grants to 12 projects. They were designed to build on the momentum of the 2019 grassroots strategic transformation process. This first set of projects that we now are highlighting on our website, if you want to check them out, focused on goal number 5, which was for WVU to be a university that advances a culture, climate, and organizational structure that promotes sustainability, well-being, and an enriched quality of life. Now we're working with a faculty team, including several senators, to launch a second round of competitive Transform This grants focused on projects that promote strategic goal number 4, which was be a model of social equity. We'll be sharing more details about these grants very soon in an email to faculty, but just to give you an idea, we're looking at projects that lead to the recruitment or retention of diverse faculty, staff, and students, projects that help to improve campus climate, make us a more welcoming place, projects that integrate social equity into the student experience and education, and more of the like. So that's the kind of stuff we'll be looking at, and we'll be announcing those grants and the application process very soon. You may see, I don't know if you saw it in the beginning, but there'll be some advertisements about the Teaching and Learning Commons offering a number of relevant and engaging virtual workshops this month, including one of my favorites titles, How to Keep Students Awake in Zoom and Other Classes. That's on March 16th and March 26th. Great alliteration. Pandemic Pedagogy, What Works Now and What We Can Keep Using Post-COVID. So those should be pretty interesting sessions. Our office is hosting a couple of events, including a panel, a faculty panel on how to engage online learners in the second half of the semester, and a session on mindfulness, another session on mindfulness, and these are in March and they're on our website. And then I just want to say, kind of wrapping this up, Natalie, I really appreciate what you said at the beginning of the meeting about the need for us to communicate with each other by being civil and showing empathy. And I really appreciate that, and I will take that to heart. And I also want to again acknowledge, I know there is frustration, continued frustration over the challenges of operating, in the COVID environment. And I do want to share that while our response may not be adequate at all times, that the administration really is making an effort to support faculty and staff as best as we can while balancing the needs of our students. And we will continue to do that. And we will continue to come to this meeting and share with you the latest information, what we have, what we don't have. And if we don't have that information, we will make sure that we get that to you. So after last Faculty Senate meeting, we immediately held a campus conversation, and we had much more current information about the vaccine process. So I just want to say thank you all. Thank you, Natalie, for speaking honestly about this and openly, and thank all of you again for your hard work and your patience as we go through this event together.
Questions for the provost? I see one question, Parviz. Go ahead, please.
Hi, Parviz Famuri, Statler College. Provost, those reorganization committees that you announced at the beginning, will the charges to these committees be public and eventually the members, but really the charges and their guiding principles will be public and for us to see? Thank you.
They already are, Parviz. So if you go to the website, you should see them.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you.
Other questions for the provost? Okay, seeing none, hearing none, we shall move on to our next agenda item, which is information about testing and vaccine distribution from our guests, Sarah Newmeyer, Ted Svelek, Paula Congilio, and General Hoyer.
Natalie, if I could just for a second.
Yes.
So you hear not only vaccination and testing, but at our last Board of Governors meeting, we also gave them an update on COVID revenue losses and expenses for FY21. And then additionally, we asked Jim Hoyer, given his work with the Joint Interagency Task Force, to talk a little bit about the impact that faculty have been making. And so if it's okay, in addition to Aaron and Ted hitting on those points, we'll just ask Paula and Jim just to highlight on a couple of those. Essentially the same presentation updated to our Board of Governors on vaccination, testing, and sort of COVID related matters, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Aaron, are you ready? Yep. Okay.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Ted Svelek. I'm the Associate Vice President for Auxiliary and Business Services. As Rob mentioned, a panel of us will present on our COVID efforts. I'll be walking you through very quickly some of our COVID numbers and kind of the current status of the campus. So next slide, please, Aaron. As you'll see on the slide, once it advances, The university last fall tested all of our student, faculty, and staff over a 3-week period beginning on July 27th, 2020. So you'll see on the left-hand side an initial spike of COVID cases we had around Labor Day that resulted in the pause of in-person classes, which leveled out, as you'll see, in late September through October. We then saw a subsequent rise in cases in November over the Thanksgiving holiday, right before the Thanksgiving holiday, and then that subsequent lowering as people went home. And so on each of our charts today, you'll see those kind of 2 blips. And then coming into our spring semester, we tested again all of our students and personnel. And this time we did it during a 1-week period in January 8th for faculty and staff, and starting on January 11th for students. With this increased testing, we obviously saw an increased rise in positive student cases, though at slightly lower levels than we saw during our fall peak over Thanksgiving. And so during February, bringing us more up to date, we saw a climb in our 7-day average of positive cases, but we're starting to see a downward trend, which you'll see much more in some of our later slides. On the next slide, you'll see our students who are in our isolation residence halls, Arnolds and Gaskins, which provide housing for COVID positive students. So we currently have less than 1/3 of our students in isolation as we did during our fall peak. We certainly saw a rise of them during January and February, and we're starting to see our numbers level out here as well. On the next slide, you'll see a graph of our students who are in quarantine. They represent kind of all of the students, both on and off campus, who are in quarantine due to someone who's COVID positive. As you can see, our number of students in quarantine is about 1/3 of what it was during our fall peak. And while the graph here represents an upward trend coming into this month, we're starting to see that number reduce over the past few weeks, or over the past weeks. You'll see that trend here, both in the top line of our students in quarantine and in our students in isolation. This graph will give you kind of both and show you, or chart will give you both and show you where they reside. Obviously, our highest number of students, both in isolation and quarantine, have been off campus. As mentioned, our quarantine numbers kind of peaked in February, and we're seeing them kind of come down here. Of additional note, I guess, we're down to about 31 students in our isolation houses. So, we're seeing that downward trend. Our next slide will give you kind of a view of our beds and occupancy at Arnolds and Gaskins. So you again see the blips that we've seen on the previous charts. But right now we're at about 1/10 of our total capacity and well able to handle more COVID positive cases should we need to. And on our final slide, you'll see our weekly trends. Our average positivity rate currently is down to about 2%, so a little bit of a downward trend from what you'll see at the end of this graph. So we've continued to see that downward movement. While it's higher than we like, it's favorable compared to the state average positivity of 5.38% and the daily positivity rate from today that was about 3.41%. So in terms of testing, we'll continue to test about 2,000 to 3,000 people a week throughout our semester. And with some of the rise that we saw, we were doing a little bit additional testing over the last couple of weeks. And now I'll pass off to Erin, who will talk a little bit about testing and vaccines.
Thanks, Ted. So as most of you know, as the majority of you likely participated in it, we hosted spring return to campus in about 7 days, as Ted previously noted. We've tested students, faculty, and staff with a live nasal virus test, the majority of which were PCR. However, this semester, I should say, we did implement antigen testing into our overall testing strategy. We did utilize 2 outside vendors to help support the sheer volume and numbers that we had for PCR test. Those vendors, we were cautiously optimistic, hoped to turn over results within 3 to 5 days. We did see that closer to the 3-day range. In addition to that, with the support of the governor and the state, WVU stood up what they're calling the RDL, the Rapid Development Lab. That lab, the university utilized for a majority of our PCR test and turned around results in about 24 hours, which significantly changed our testing strategy. We continue to utilize that lab. It's a great asset and resource on our campus. And it's been a huge change in able to get a PCR, which is still the gold standard of testing results within 12 to 24 hours returned. We did implement antigen testing, as I noted. Resident hall coordinators and our resident hall assistants did receive an antigen test, which is still a nasal live virus test, but it can result in about 15 minutes. Given the numbers that we had turned around, they were resulting in probably 2 to 6 hours, which enabled us to quickly identify positives as they were moving into the resident halls, remove them from the broader population, and place them in isolation to prevent quick spread. The university also, for the first time, accepted outside live virus PCR test results from other West Virginia state-supported testing for faculty and staff only. We had heard through the fall semester that some faculty and staff have been testing regularly. And so we did have a drop-off date and a period that we did accept those test results as well. So overall, Ted talked about our positivity rate, but just a snapshot of what our spring return to campus testing looked like. For the initial testing, we tested 16,219 students in the span of about 7 days, 231 positives with a positivity rate of 1.42%, which we were very pleased with. Also, we tested 4,043 faculty and staff with 47 confirmed positives and a positivity rate of 1.16%. We are continuing to test through sample and survey testing, as Ted mentioned, across the university. Approximately about 10% of our population, with the introduction of the variant in West Virginia, or a couple of the variants in West Virginia over the course of the past couple of weeks, we have increased that number slightly, just to keep a better eye and a better handle as far as what's going on our campus. WVU Kaiser and WVU Beckley campuses also conducted free return to campus testing, and it was separate and independent from these results for the Morgantown campus. So at the end of the year, the 30th of December, the university was able to implement our very first vaccine clinic. So as part of the state's vaccination effort, the Joint Interagency Task Force included higher education in Phase 1D and started providing 1,000 vaccines a week to all of higher education employees 50 and older throughout the state. So the program was primarily run for the past 8 weeks. To date, we have vaccinated 1,815 employees with their 2 doses. So they've received the full vaccine dose, and another 616 employees who have received their first dose. Those 616 employees will receive their second doses over the course of the next 2 to 3 weeks. The last vaccine clinic that we currently have scheduled is on the 25th of March. In addition, 757 HSC students have received their 2 doses or their 2-dose vaccine, and the 42 HSC outstanding students who have only received the first will receive their second dose next week, and we'll close out the HSC vaccine clinic as well. The goal of those HSC student vaccinations were to increase our vaccination capacity. Those students have been providing vaccines across the community and across the state, as well as at our vaccine site as well. Employees, with the governor's announcement last week, which I'm sure everyone is well aware of, employees 40 and older on all of our campuses, Morgantown, Beckley, and Kaiser, did receive an invitation to complete a questionnaire to submit their interest in a vaccine. We've been working with the state to see what our vaccine program will look like. The questionnaire closed on Friday. However, we've left it open and we continue to receive a few later results. About 2,000 individuals from 40 to 49 received the questionnaire. Of those 2,000 individuals, we had about 975 indicate that they were interested in the vaccine. We're working with the Higher Education Policy Commission, WVU Hospital, as well as the National Guard to figure out what that vaccine program will look like. Likely vaccines will be available the week of March 15th or the week of March 22nd for that population. And the university is still working with those partners to figure out how we can most quickly and expeditiously vaccinate individuals that week or the following week as those vaccines are made available. We'll provide further communication as details are solidified. We did communicate broadly to campus with a special e-news so that folks, regardless of age, were aware of the change in the program or the vaccine allocation. And we also communicated specifically with that audience 40 to 49, just to make sure that they were very well aware of the opportunity being made available to them. So we'll continue to communicate both broadly and at the target audience level, so no one misses an opportunity. And I think I will pass it to Paula for finances.
Okay, thank you, everyone. So we can flip to the first slide in the finance presentation. We want to talk about, we've heard so much about everything that we went through in this last year. So of course it took a toll on our finances. So this first page is a summary of the expenses that we've seen so far. So as of February, when we took this information to the board, we had spent about $18,400,000 in expenses, and we anticipate by the end of the year that that number will approach 23 million. But just to go through some of these items, of course, testing, the fourth line down, is the largest expense. You heard about the return to campus testing we did in both the fall and the spring. The surveillance testing we do weekly, and that will continue through the end of the year. So all of those tests that both Ted and Aaron were talking about amounted to about 8.6 million. That will take us through the end of the year. We had disinfection of the campus and sanitizing products that we had to buy. PPE, all the masks and all the plexiglass that we put around the university. Our PRT wasn't running, so we contracted with outside bus lines to bring buses into the university to transport our students around. We had student support services. We had things like tents around the campus to allow the students to be able to enjoy some time, although socially distanced. And we also had to help with some of our international students who, of course, weren't able to travel home. So we had additional costs there. So in total, those costs by year end, we anticipate to be about 23 million. Beyond these expenses, we also had some losses in revenue. And you'll see the first line item is our gross tuition revenue loss. We estimated to be about $9 million. And this is attributed to a few things. First of all, we were planning for fiscal year 21, the year that we're in. We had been planning a 2.5% tuition increase, which we decided to forego since the economic impact of COVID was tough on all of our families and our students. And we had lower first-time freshmen than we were anticipating. So all in all, that was about a $9 million reduction in tuition than we were originally anticipating. In addition, our university fee reduction in both the fall and the spring, we discounted our university fee by 2/3 to any students who were considered totally online. We had housing and dining refunds. Since our fall semester was delayed by a week, we refunded or adjusted our pricing for housing and dining in the fall. We had less students in our dorms overall, whether students looked at the fact that their schedule was maybe 1 or 2 days on campus and it was maybe more inexpensive for them to drive. But overall, we had less people in our dorms. And of course, you could imagine we had less parking revenue also. So in total, including an athletics loss of about 29 million, and actually our latest estimates are about closer to 27 million, we had a total loss in revenue of about 55.3 million. And if you look at that in total, that's about a $78 million impact from both the additional expenses and the loss in revenue that we had. So a huge impact to our financials, 78 million. So if we go on, we can look at some of the relief that we were able to seek for the university. You'll recall that last spring, we first heard about the CARES Act money coming in. And our first tranche that the university got was 20.2 million. And those monies came to the university in 2 installments. The first installment of about 10 million had to go directly out to student aid. They were impacted greatly, of course, their families. And so $10 million in grants went out to our students based on different eligibility factors. The second share of that money, the second 10 million, came to the university and helped us offset some of those expenses we just went through. But we used it mostly to offset the $13.6 million in housing and dining that we had to refund to our students last fiscal year, because you'll recall we really sent them home. So we really discounted those monies, and that 10 million helped to offset that, but of course didn't totally offset it. This past December, we had news of the second CARES Act, the second stimulus package. And this time it was $30 million for the university. And again, came in 2 installments. The first 10 million came in aid once again to our students. Much of that money has already gone out to our students, and that is still underway. So again, direct grants to our students who were both Pell eligible first and now going out to other students who maybe didn't meet that eligibility. The second part of that money, 20 million, will be used again to offset those increased expenses and reductions in revenue that we talked about. Right now, we're working with the Department of Education, and we're hopeful that we can apply that funding to expenses prior to December 27th, when the announcement of these funds came out. But right now, that's still in question. It'd certainly be a great help to us if we could use it for expenses and lost revenue prior to December. In addition, we've recently heard that there might be another stimulus package coming out, so we stay hopeful that that money will continue to help us with the additional impact that we had financially because of COVID. So beyond the CARES Act money coming into the university, we did several other things to help us get through this year. You've probably heard that we had a 5% spend reduction across the university, which resulted in a $35 million reduction in expenses. We paused and reevaluated all capital projects last spring. And as of now, we're just starting to start some of those projects back up again. But that, of course, saved a lot of cash for us in uncertain times. We're maximizing reimbursement of expenses and lost revenues with any state and federal agency that we can. We're hopeful to get some money from the state for testing. We've submitted many costs to FEMA for reimbursement, so we're taking advantage of all of those things that we can. Last spring, we had some refinancing of a big portion of our debt, which gave us some cash upfront, some savings, and that was great and helped with the finances this year. We already talked about the CARES money coming in. And in addition, we just worked with our board to issue additional debt for some of our regularly occurring capital projects that we usually use our cash for. So again, by issuing that debt, that will help us pay for expenses like deferred maintenance and things that are more common, not our big long-term projects, and will help us hold on to our cash just as we get through the rest of the pandemic and things normalize a bit. I think that's it for me.
Is there one more presenter? Is it time to?
Good afternoon. This is General Hoyer. And you have some slides that I will allow you all to look through at your availability to do so. I was asked to give my perspective to the board and to you all as a faculty senate. And my perspective comes from 40 years of military service, 15 of those in a leadership role in the National Guard, 10 of which were as the head of the National Guard and responding to most of the all of the major disasters that our state has faced over those 15 years of time. And I just, what I laid out to the board and what I'd like to lay out to you all as faculty and the institution is, in my time of service in the Guard and working for 3 governors across multiple responses, this is a phenomenal operationalizing of the university, and it is significant to the state's response to this pandemic. The work that has gone on from the data analytics folks and Brad Price to the work of Dr. Ramsey, Dr. Gibson, Parada, Solov, and Dameron related to the development in less than 3 months of a PCR test, to the work that Sally Hodder's done and work that Jeff Coben has done, Dr. Sharman, Dr. Capehart, Lisa Costello, who is working down in our interagency task force, to Tim Nerkowitz in the toxicology lab, and the folks at RNI, the folks doing the wastewater work, and the Reed College of Media providing us guidance as we attempt to shape messaging for the state of West Virginia, as well as the folks in shared services who have helped us do everything from make sure that West Virginians got unemployment benefits when they needed it, to helping us get people registered to get a vaccine. And then all that brought together with the steady hand and leadership of Clay Marsh. West Virginia University, my perspective, having done this for a number of years, should be exceptionally proud of the work that has occurred by faculty and staff as a part of the state's overall response to this pandemic. And I would tell you, without it, we would not be in the place that we are. It is unfortunate, the loss of life that we've had in West Virginia, but I ask you to put it in this perspective. We are the 3rd oldest state in the nation. By the Kaiser Family Foundation data, we are the most at risk with health risk. We could have been decimated as a state. While we are still struggling to overcome many things, we could be in a much, much worse position. But because of the great work by a lot of people at the local, state, and federal level, and the specific work of the people from this institution, in the first 8 weeks of 2021, the death rate due to COVID in West Virginia has dropped 88%. And we are down to below 200 people across all of our hospitals in the state of West Virginia, the lowest we've been since the first week of October. So on behalf of the interagency task force and all the leadership and the governor's leadership team, I just want to thank you all for the significant work that this institution has done to help us through this response. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that presentation. Are there questions for our panelists? Okay, I see a question in the chat from Rose Casey, who's an ECAS senator, and it looks like this one's for Aaron. She's asking if there's a sense of when faculty and staff under 40 will start to be vaccinated. So if you wouldn't mind repeating that information, Aaron. And she's also asking about GTAs. Will GTAs, many of whom are teaching face-to-face, be vaccinated? I'm assuming via WVU as well.
So the timeline for those over 40 will likely be March 15th or March 22nd. I actually might defer to General Hoyer or Rob on the timeline for those under the age of 40, as I've not been involved in those discussions within the state.
I think, go ahead, Jim.
So I don't think I could give you a specific date, but I can tell you that based on the increase of vaccines that we see coming to the state of West Virginia over the next 30 days, we are going to be in a much better position than we envisioned ourselves 30 to 45 days ago. We continue to focus on age because of the epidemiology data and what it shows us. And I know people are anxious, but I think we will be starting to see a lot more flow of vaccines coming to the state in the near future.
Thank you. Are there other questions?
Sorry, Natalie, can I just follow up on the second part of that question, which is, will GTAs be vaccinated as well? Are they being vaccinated? I'm assuming that many of those are in the younger age groups, and I know that many of those are teaching face-to-face. So do we have a timeline for so I suppose that's a question really maybe for somebody else. We don't know the timeline. We're hoping sooner rather than later. But will they be included in those vaccination pushes, I suppose, through the university? Or do we just not know at this stage?
So we've had conversations with the state and with Dr. Marsh and with Jim Hoyer. And right now what we're hoping is that if you were working at the university, then you would, even if you're from out of state or international, if you are employed by the university, you would be able to get your vaccination at that point in time, that it was either lowered like it was to 40 or lowered as a part of the general population when that goes. I think as far as timing, I think Clay has indicated that, we could do 125,000 shots a week as opposed to the 25,000 that we've been getting. And so, I think Dr. Fauci said everybody who wanted to get a vaccine should be able to by May, and West Virginia's been running ahead of what some other states have done. And so I think that can be, what it will be, but the problem, it's not a problem. Everything is moving so quickly. I mean, I know the state got an indication, hey, you're going to get 15,000 Johnson & Johnson shots next week. But we thought that meant 15,000 that week, and then it would continue in that supply. Well, it turns out that had to get us through 3 weeks before we get another infusion of Johnson & Johnson shots. And so as they get more shots, we've been asking for more and more for the university. And it really is a function of the centralization in DC of how many shots are available from a supply chain perspective, and then when they come out.
This is really helpful. Thank you. And GTAs have been asking me these questions as well, so I appreciate your answer.
Yep.
Other questions from the floor? I do see the one in the chat, but I would like to see if there are any other hands. Okay, the question in the chat, I'm wondering if WVU employees with COVID accommodations, so people with certain underlying conditions regardless of age, are going to get vaccinated. So that's a question for Rob or for Aaron.
I know that Dr. Marsh indicated, I think in his last round, that they were starting to look at some individuals with our underlying conditions regardless of age. I think there were some very narrow categories, and I'll really need to follow up with Dr. Marsh and perhaps Dr. Coben on when that will occur, but they have started to look at a few things regardless of age for vaccinations, and we'll just have to get back to you on what the timeline for that might be.
And Rob, there were, if folks will go out on the website, the state website, there were certain health conditions that are now opened up at the same time we opened up the 40 to 50 age group. So if you have those health conditions that are listed, you are now eligible for a vaccine.
Any other questions? All right, thank you very, very much, Aaron, Ted, Paula, and General Hoyer for coming to Senate and providing us all of this information. It really was very helpful.
Thank you for the opportunity. Thanks, guys.
Okay, next up is my report. Okay, thought I was muted, but I'm not. Okay, so last week you should have received an election ballot for new senators. After those ballots went out, I received several emails from you and your constituents about the process of nominating and of balloting. So, so I received questions like, I nominated a colleague, but they didn't appear on the ballot, or why are there so many nominees from one department on my college's ballot? So the short answer is we have a longstanding process and constitutional procedure for balloting. So a nominee must receive multiple nominations before they appear on a college ballot. So, so you can't just receive one nomination and then appear. You have to be nominated by multiple folks, either in your department or your college. Now that process is not without its own problems or challenges. So for one, not very many people know about the process. And then a second problem, which some folks in some colleges saw, it is indeed possible for one department or program to dominate the ballot. Again, as that happened this year. And so Senate executive leadership will be kind of investigating the problem further and bringing recommendations to Senate before the end of this academic year. So that process of balloting is more fair and more representative of all of our constituents. Okay, so second item, as the provost mentioned, the strategic transformation committees have started to meet. Ashley Martucci and I serve on the Academic Advisory Transformation Committee. Ashley's the chair. That group has met twice already, and meeting notes from that are posted on the Provost Academic Transformation website. So I'm going to put that in the chat. I'm going to put the main site in the chat, and from that you can drill down and find the meeting notes. So we are taking notes, and we will be posting them. The second meeting set of meeting notes have yet to be posted. I've got to get those submitted. And so that they're posted on the website. But in our meetings thus far, we've been given our charge, which is as follows, and that is to assist in transforming the academic enterprise so that WVU survives and thrives in the changing academic environment. In subsequent meetings, the committee will be consulting on proposed metrics to assess program health, on ways to eliminate redundancies and consider newer academic structures for savings and growth, and on ways to improve instructional efficiencies. And for more information, I encourage you to visit the Provost website. And you're certainly welcome to reach out to me or to reach out to Ashley for more information on the academic transformation, like the committee on which we serve. So I've asked David Addis from EAB, who is co-chairing the Academic Advisory Committee with Ashley, to come to Faculty Senate in April. And during his address, he will discuss the changing landscape of higher education and how academic transformation can help us respond to that changing landscape. And finally, this is, and actually the provost made reference to this, due to the popularity of the first Senate sponsored kind of engagement panel that we held just before the semester began. We will be holding a second event, and that's in collaboration with the Provost Office. So this will be more of a workshop than a panel, and it will take place next Monday, March 15th from 4 to 5:15 p.m. And as the Provost mentioned, that's also on her website. So are there any questions for me? Yes, Parviz.
So Natalie, I just want to say that committees on committees, when I was a faculty senate chair, it was committees on committees. And no, it's not membership. I think it is really their responsibility to make sure that everything is distributed, the way the colleges and yeah, that's it. That's all I wanted to say. That's how we used to do it. I don't know how we.
Yes, so right. So this is not a Senate committee, and I think that's the difference. So this is a provost committee, and I'm sure the provost could speak to this, but it's she kind of makes the determination as to how information is disseminated. We are, she mentioned that we were in talks about how to, what information to disseminate and how to disseminate that information. And
Yeah.
this is what we've agreed on thus far.
Thank you. Just could you please send us the link or tell us what to Google for that? Yeah, those reorganization committees, and thank you.
Yep, and I can post. I just posted it in the chat, but I'm happy to kind of distribute it more widely in an email. Are there other questions? Okay, hearing none. I see a question from Heiko. Heiko, go ahead.
Hi, thank you, Natalie. Just a quick question. I'm just curious, how were those committees formed? How were the people selected? Who selected them? What criteria were used? Just curious to hear a little bit about that.
Yeah, yes. Provost Reed, would you like to talk about how the committees were formed?
Yeah. Hi, Heiko. Yeah, so the advisory committee, and I talked about this at the last meeting, but the advisory committee, which is really the committee that's working on the tightest timeline, I would say. They're the ones that are working on those kind of key areas of academic transformation that are on a more accelerated timeline. But those members were selected through nominations or recommendations, if you will, from Natalie and Ashley, as well as from the deans and other administrative leaders. And so the list was put together that way, and I ran by every name by Ashley and Natalie just to make sure, you know, that they thought they were good folks to be on that committee, and if there were issues, we pulled them. But basically, we were looking for faculty who were known to be very engaged in the university and who we felt had that broader perspective and would be willing to put in the work and the time. And that's how it was done. And then the other committees, a real mix of things. I know Evan could probably speak to the Student Success Committee. The graduate task force, there already was one, and it was just adding folks who represented different kinds of graduate programs. It's a very small group. And the Faculty Awards and Recognition Committee, that is led by Presha Niedermeyer. I'm sure she could talk about how those folks were selected, but I'm imagining it was a similar process. So, but I can speak to that one committee. Do you want us to go through the rest of those committees? Are you comfortable with kind of how we did that? It doesn't matter.
I mean, unless those other two committees were put together very differently, that helps already. I'm just,
yeah, no,
it's nice to understand the process.
Yeah, get it. I get it.
Thank you.
Yep.
Other questions? Okay. So next is the announcement of declared candidates for nominations from the floor of the Faculty Senate, or from the floor for Faculty Senate Chair-elect. So Milena Bernstein, a Service Associate Professor in the College of Education and Human Services, has been declared a candidate for Faculty Senate Chair-elect. Are there additional nominations from the floor?
Natalie, this is Ramana Reddy, and I'd like to nominate Scott Wayne from Statler College.
Okay. Scott Wayne, do you accept the nomination?
Yes, I'm willing to serve.
Are there other nominations from the floor? Any additional nominations? Okay. So I just want to make sure I'm doing this correctly. So from this point, Judy, I move to the statement about hearing no additional nominations except for the candidacy. Is that correct? I don't need to do anything else after I ask if Scott has accepted his nomination.
So how about if I move to close the nomination?
I've got it. I've got it. I just wanted to make sure. Yep. I just wanted to make sure I didn't need to, I didn't wanted to make sure there wasn't an intermediary step.
Nope, that's it. If there are no more nominations, then you just need to make sure that you close them.
Yep. Okay. So hearing no additional nominations for the candidacy of Senate Chair-elect, nominations are closed. The candidates will have the opportunity to speak at the April meeting and to submit a candidate statement beforehand, and that will be distributed to you. The elected candidate will serve as Faculty Senate Chair during the 2022-2023 academic year. Okay, very good. 2 candidates. That's excellent. Okay, moving on to the Curriculum Committee report. Jennifer Steele, are you ready?
Yes, I am. Thank you. So I will do the approval items first. There are a ton of them. And then we'll go on to the information items. So I have for approval the new courses report, which is Annex 1, course changes is Annex 2, capstone courses Annex 3, and then several programs. Okay, so we have program changes to the BS in fashion, dress, and merchandising, along with 2 AOEs for that major, fashion design and fashion merchandising. We have program changes to the AOE in health professions, and that's part of the exercise phys major. We have program changes to the BA in interactive design for media, program changes to the BM in music education, and a new BA in mental health and addiction studies. I could take any questions if you have them.
Are there questions about the annexes and all the program changes on the new BA? Okay, so we will combine all of the 4 approval items into a single votable measure. All those in favor of approving Annex 1, the new course report, Annex 2, the course changes report, Annex 3, the capstone report, the many program changes, and the new BA, please raise your hand. I'm closing the vote. Okay, 85 votes in favor. Julie, will you lower all hands, please? Thank you. Could you lower one more hand? See, Amy, there we go. Okay, very good. And any opposed, please raise your hand. Okay, I'm closing the vote. So all of the 4 approval items are approved.
Great. Okay, so I have some information items as well. Then I have 3 new minors, 1 in healthcare data analytics, land reclamation, and sustainable trails development. Then also the graduate programs report. So Grad Council approved a postmaster certificate in nurse executive leadership. So those are the information items, if you have any questions.
Any questions on the 4 information items? Okay, moving on. Next is the General Education Foundations Committee report. Lisa D, are you ready?
I am, Madam Chair. I have Annex 5, which has ENTR 203, course entitled Data Analysis for Problem Solving as a new GEF 3 course for your approval.
Are there any questions about Annex 5? All those in favor of approving Annex 5, please raise your hand. Okay, I'm going to close the vote. Okay, 81 votes in favor. Julie, could you lower all hands, please? Okay, any opposed? Please raise your hand. Okay, I'm closing the vote. Okay, no opposed. So Annex 5 is approved. Thank you, Lisa.
All right.
Oh, and then you have one for information item.
We have a for information item, which is Annex 6, and it is a listing of this year's slate of honors faculty fellow courses, and I'm happy to answer any questions on those courses.
Any questions for Lisa on Annex 6? Okay, thank you. Next, we'll hear from our Teaching and Assessment Committee Chair, Jessica Vanderhoff.
Thank you, Natalie. So we have no formal report, just a progress update with a couple of different working groups who are in various stages of their work. So as most folks know, last night, the early semester teaching assessment closed. For those instructors who opted into that, if you didn't receive your report, your course level report, you can access it using the same dashboard that you access your ESCI surveys. As of last Thursday, we had 6,000 surveys submitted, and that represented about 4,500 unique students. Hopefully, or not hopefully, definitely next month, I'll have firm numbers on exactly what participation looked like. In addition to the early semester teaching assessment, we have groups working on revamping our syllabus review process, looking at a student-centered video and module on providing constructive feedback. And then we're also making good progress on updating the ESCI complaint workflow so that it includes both an option for inappropriate student comments that violated the student code of conduct, in addition to those that didn't necessarily violate the student code of conduct, but are still inappropriate. So that should be ready for public consumption also by the next full Senate meeting. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Questions for Jessica? Okay, thank you, Jessica. Next, we'll hear from our Inclusion and Diversity Chair, Carrie Valentine, for her report.
Hi, thank you, Natalie. So I'm not going to give a report right now, but I think everybody saw the Annex 7. This is an ordinance establishing a civilian police review and advisory board. The Faculty Senate Inclusion and Diversity Committee would like to make a motion that the Faculty Senate endorse the Morgantown City Ordinance establishing a civilian police review and advisory board and encourage the Morgantown City Council to adopt. The Civilian Police Review and Advisory Board proposes a mechanism to provide oversight of the Morgantown Police Department, grounded in the principle that community input equals a safer community for civilians and police officers. Dr. Jerry Carr is joining us today. He is the president of the Morgantown Kingwood branch of the NAACP, and also a member of the Faculty Senate Inclusion and Diversity Committee. And he communicated to us how pivotal that June 2020 Faculty Senate support, where we supported the letter to work with the Morgantown Police Department and city manager. And that effort really helped bring about this proposed ordinance. On January 29th, 2021, our committee voted in favor of supporting the ordinance and seeking full Faculty Senate support. We acknowledge that policing in the Morgantown community in which WVU is located affects the students, faculty, and staff who reside and work in Morgantown. So I would like to recognize Dr. Jerry Carr and see if he could speak to that more and take questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Carrie. I definitely appreciate the opportunity to talk to everyone. And good afternoon to all of the Faculty Senate. So this is really just us continuing the conversation that we started last summer. Last summer, we all came here and we were wondering, what can we do? How can we make a stand that what we see, happening across the country was not acceptable, and we needed to find some course of action. I've been very fortunate to work with WVU in this case. Part of that resolution that everybody passed last year had a key line in it, and it talked about looking for ways to get WVU to help in the process. Just some parts of this. So we did focus on a lot of things that were put in the letter, but we really wanted to create something that was more systemic. So we looked at the review board piece, the review and advisory board piece, because we knew that as things changed, there was something that could handle, that could remain adaptable to the situation. So everything, possible reforms such as, first responders that may not be police officers, but maybe mental health folks, that would have a group of people who can research that, propose that idea, and be tied very closely to city council in order to make those things. So the idea of review and reviewing basically things that come in and making policy recommendations, that is the most essential piece of this board when it's all said and done. The other things that does, just to quickly, it is a great liaison tool between the community and the police. We believe that monthly meeting or so, like dialogue that happens with community, will be an essential part of what's going on here. And also it will look at complaints of misconduct. It gives a track for people to know that they could come here and they can have somebody who's independent and outside of the police take a look and make a fair assessment on whether or not there's something there or the police are vindicated. At least there's that, that's something that I believe that all sides want when it's all said and done, because right now, if it's internal, there's a lack of transparency and just trust that comes from the community on these type of issues. I just want to point out that we didn't back away from that commitment. We did work with WVU Law. We worked with Jim Nolan, who studies police reform. It is such a unique opportunity that this town, that this city, that this college has to try to join these ideas together, police reform with experts, and something that can actually happen within the community itself. Other things I just got to mention, we were also involved with the WVU working group that President Gee set up for UPD, and those conversations that happen at multiple levels with students, board of governors, high level administrators like Rob Alsop. There was a great dialogue there that also helped influence what you see in this conversation. So I think that's all I wanted to say. I just want to give that additional background and also allow myself to answer any, I'll just give the opportunity to answer any questions that people might have.
Okay, questions for Carrie or Jerry Carr?
And I'm not good at reading at the chat, so it does happen and I missed it. I apologize.
You're fine. I don't see anything in the chat yet.
Okie dokie.
I'm giving folks time to respond. It looks like I jumped the gun last time. I do see a question. I do see it. I'm sorry. I apologize, Shine, because I do see your question about the SEI comments.
Okay.
Okay. So hearing no questions, there is a motion on the floor for Faculty Senate to endorse the creation of a civilian police review and advisory board. Is that, did I get that right, Carrie? The motion? Yep.
You did. So the motion is to get full Faculty Senate report support, sorry,
Yep.
on the ordinance, and also to encourage the Morgantown City Council to adopt this proposal.
To encourage, okay. Morgantown City Council to adopt proposal.
And and another thing, and I don't know if this needs to go in the motion, but as Jerry Carr mentioned, we also have a desire for, WVU to be involved in continuing to work with the review and advisory board to study policing, social justice, racism, and the way it can shape public policy. And we really do see this as a model for other communities, both locally and around the state.
Okay, I want to get it in the chat. Police review. And advisory board. And to encourage Morgantown City Council to adopt the proposal. Or for Faculty Senate to endorse the creation of civilian police review and advisory board and to encourage Morgantown City Council to adopt the proposal. Yes? Good?
Does that sound right? Jerry, is that?
Mhm.
Can you see the chat?
I'm reading it.
Okay.
I believe so, yeah.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Second.
Terrific. Very good. I like these enthusiastic seconds.
Yes.
Okay, all those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Okay, I'm calling the vote, or sorry, closing the vote. I keep saying that. I'm closing the vote. Okay, 75 in favor. Julie, can you lower hands? And lower hands one more time. See a couple people. Okay, any opposed? Please raise your hand. Okay, I'm going to close the vote. Okay. So it looks like the motion carries. Now, Jerry, what is it that you'll need from me? Maybe that's something that we can talk about after the meeting.
If that's okay with you, yeah, I'd be happy to do that. But looking for a statement that basically just reflects this is the kind of thing I'm thinking about. And while I still have the microphone, I just also want to acknowledge this Senate's work, specifically also the Inclusion and Diversity Committee, for also just being an instrumental piece in this whole discussion. So thank y'all.
Thank you. Thanks, Carrie and Jerry. Okay, I'm going to go backwards a little bit, and I apologize, Shine, for not getting to your question. I moved on faster than you could type. So Jessica, would you mind just answering Shine's question really quickly?
Sure. So it's not something that we have discussed, but I will bring it back to the working group and make sure that we discuss it. And when I bring it back to Taco as well as exec, I will talk to them about any issues that might present, or, you know, if we're able to do it, hopefully we would be able to accommodate it. Does that answer? Thanks, Shine.
Great, thank you. Apologies again. Okay, next is a report from our ad hoc committee on third-party tools. Our co-chairs are Lori Ogden and Megan Light. Are you ready?
We are. Thanks, Natalie. I'm Lori Ogden from Eberly, and I, along with Megan Light from the School of Art and Design, co-chaired this ad hoc committee. And I'd also like to acknowledge Tracy Beckley from the Teaching and Learning Commons, as she was a really incredible resource to us, and that all three of us would be available to answer questions or address comments after the report. So just to reiterate quickly, this committee was established in response to the SGA letter this past fall. They raised some concerns over the cost, confusion, and kind of consistency among courses because of the use of third-party tools in their classes. So we were charged with exploring third-party tool use, uncovering the issues related to third-party tools, and then making recommendations to the TLC, ITS, Provost Office. We really saw this charge fairly exploratory in nature. We started meeting back in October, and we've met about 7 or 8 times since then. You know, and even at first, we had a hard time even defining third-party tool. Depending on where you look, it can be defined differently in many different places. So we kind of adopted the term academic technology because it just encompasses a little bit more, I think, about what we're talking about, and that's just really any technology that's used in an academic setting. But throughout our many conversations, we just uncovered so many other issues beyond the concerns raised by our students. Some of those issues include personal information security, student privacy, third-party technology support concerns, academic integrity, faculty academic freedom. And these are all kind of layered that, you know, just because a tool is free doesn't mean that it's necessarily secure. Just because a tool integrates with the LMS doesn't mean that it's free to students. So again, these issues just kind of overlap and continue to go on and on. We did deploy 2 surveys. The students deployed a survey to the students. About 250 responded, and 94% of our students report using third-party tools in their courses. We also sent a survey to faculty and had an incredible response. Over 600 faculty responded. 76% responded that they either don't use third-party tools or that they do consider if the tool integrates with eCampus when adopting. And then also 69% of faculty responded said they would consider adopting a tool if it was licensed by WVU to lower indirect cost to students. So our recommendations really are as follows. First and foremost, and really perhaps the only recommendation that can be acted upon now, is that we believe this conversation should continue and recommend that Senate establish a standing advisory committee to really inform and advise the use of all academic technologies across campuses. And although we had a fantastic group serving on our committee, we were somewhat limited to what I think we could accomplish. That this standing committee needs to include membership either in a regular or ex officio manner from libraries, ITS, TLC, faculty across our campuses. Other recommendations to really address the current concerns of students regarding cost would be, you know, a transparency of cost, that we support full disclosure of all course costs to students, regardless of course modality prior to registration. This would include use of academic technologies. So for example, a course marking designation, like on the schedule of courses, to signify which courses would include an additional cost to students. Then with respect to confusion and consistency, and kind of to promote ease of access, we believe the primary instructional tool access point should be a WVU authenticated LMS, such as eCampus or SOL. And then in the long term, to organize an awareness campaign that key stakeholders such as ITS, libraries, TLC should partner to raise awareness and expand the existing resources. There's a lot of information that we have on our websites. It just needs, some of it could be updated, maybe consolidated, and even just made a little bit more easily accessible. And then the last is just involving and maybe institutional access, so that WVU consider purchasing institutional licenses for widely used instructional tools such as Adobe or iClicker. That this type of access would address the aforementioned concerns, reducing cost for students, but also would allow WVU to take advantage of potential economies of scale to leverage purchasing power. And it would also reduce that confusion and consistency that students mentioned. And that also our faculty indicated they would support this in our survey. So that really concludes our report. We welcome any questions or comments.
Great, thank you. So questions for Lori? Okay, thank you, Lori. Okay, next is a report from our faculty representative to state government, Roy Nutter. Roy, are you ready?
I am Roy Nutter, Statler College, and your State Advisory Council faculty representative. First, legislature, I really appreciated hearing from Rob on what was going on. He was like one step ahead of what I knew about campus carry. Everything I hear is it's still quiet down there, so I don't really see anything moving at the moment. The things that are moving, though, are the state income tax and the questions of how that's going to be paid for. I don't hear a lot about higher education funding being cut. In fact, it looks like it's going to stay the same, at least for this year. The other bill that's generating some comment is one to merge Pierpont Community College and Fairmont. Depending on which side of that line you stand on, it might get a little heated before it's over. I think Pierpont, after this morning's Senate session, is making super progress at becoming very visible. So I'm kind of doubtful that has much chance of moving, but we'll see. The other thing you probably want to know about, Advisory Council of Faculty has been discussing evaluation of Board of Governors, not just faculty reps, but all members of Board of Governors in all schools. And that is kind of pushed down to the question of, if we're going to evaluate Board of Governors, maybe we should evaluate presidents and provosts and deans. I know we do that here at WVU to some extent, especially of deans, but I'm not sure how much that's done statewide. So that's kind of the discussions that are going on in the State Faculty's Advisory Council of Faculty. I don't see action this year, but I think it's stirring the pot, and you could easily see that come up in another year. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Roy. Are there questions for Roy? Okay. Next is a Board of Governors report from Stan Heilman.
So the board had a general meeting or regular meeting on February 10th. We adopted Rule 3.4, which dealt with adding some of the opioids and things to drug and alcohol testing to bring it into national compliance. We also heard several of the updates that you heard today on COVID transformation, as well as budgetary updates. We also had a special meeting last Friday on March 5th. And in that case, we approved debt to be issued for the continuation and finishing of the Hodges Hall renovation, Reynolds Hall construction, the Milan Pushkar Center renovation, as well as deferred maintenance at the health sciences, and then some debt for short-term capital, which will be applied to various things around the campus. We also approved an amendment to the contract with Sodexo, as well as the contract with the Aquatic and Track Center at Milan Park. As you can imagine, those two entities have been hit pretty hard with COVID. And so there's been some restructuring of the contracts with those to make sure that, in essence, WVU didn't lose money or have to pay money on some of those contracts. The next regular meeting of the board will be on April 23rd. And that is my report, Natalie.
Thank you. Are there questions for Stan? Okay, so we will move on to our next agenda item, which is for approval, a resolution to reauthorize shared governance committee. So Dave, are you ready?
Yeah. So you can see in the annex that this is essentially a duplicate of what we did last year. So 2 years ago, we authorized a shared governance committee to look into issues surrounding governance at the university and larger questions about whether the Constitution changes and not changes and things like that. That committee still toils on diligently and needs to continue to do its work. We've got a buy-in from the provost and the provost office at this point, and so we're hopeful to move this along for another year and try to actually talk about specific constitutional changes in the future. So this is a straightforward resolution that just authorizes the committee to exist for at least another year.
So is there a second for approving the resolution to reauthorize the shared governance committee? Okay, thank you, Scott. Is there any questions or points of discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, I'm closing the vote. Julie, will you clear hands for me? One more hand, thank you. One more. Okay. Any opposed? Okay, I'm closing the vote. Okay. So the shared governance committee is renewed for an additional year. Very good. Okay, and next is another for approval item, resolutions to create standing committees. For this next agenda item, we'll only be taking up Annex 10, the resolution to create a Faculty Senate Sustainability Committee. Annex 11 needs to go back to exec for revision. So are you ready, Dave?
Sure, and my toddler is going to chime in here too. Again, a couple years ago, we created a sustainability committee as an ad hoc kind of committee. It did, again, laudatory work over the past couple of years. The committee itself essentially said there is more work to be done on an ongoing basis, and asked to turn this into a standing committee that would exist as necessary into the future, so it could continue to ask questions and work with the administration on issues of sustainability. So all this does now is turn that temporary committee into a permanent committee.
Is there a second to create the Faculty Senate Sustainability Committee?
Down School of Medicine, I second.
Okay, very good, thank you. Okay, can we lower those hands, Julie? Lower hand, lower hand. See, a couple I haven't taken a vote yet. Are there any questions, amendments, points of discussion? I see folks raising hands. Is this because you have questions? There we go. Okay. Danielle Elswick, do you have a question? No? Okay. Could you lower her hand, please, Julie? Okay, so all those in favor of approving Annex 10, please raise your hand. Okay, I'm going to close the vote. Okay, any opposed? Okay, we're going to take down the hands first. All right, let's try that again. Any opposed? Okay, I'm going to close the vote. Okay, so Annex 10, the resolution to create a standing committee on sustainability carries. Next up is new business. Is there any new business?
Natalie, may I mention something about the previous two items?
Yes.
Just very quickly,
And
Michael
you-
Germana, Eberly College
Thanks,
of Arts and Sciences. I'm also the chair of the Committee on Committees. As these committees move forward, either in ad hoc or if they become standing committees, I'll be in touch with the chairs of these committees, particularly those that are going to become standing committees, for some guidance on how to formalize the structure of those committees going forward. So just keep an eye out for an email in the forthcoming week, but any guidance that anybody can provide would be greatly appreciated.
Thank you, Michael. Okay. Are we ready for new business? Is there any new business? Okay, hearing no new business, is there a motion to adjourn? So thank you, Scott. All right. We'll see everyone next time. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Thank you, Natalie.